You know, Emma, Principal Morrison said, leaning back in her leather chair, I've been thinking, are you really happy here at Ashford? Her eyes swept over my thrift store blazer, my second-hand bag. I mean, with your situation, the scholarship, the part-time work, wouldn't you be more comfortable somewhere less demanding? Financially, I mean. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The public university has excellent programs, more suited to students in your position. I felt my face burn. Outside her office, Daniel was waiting to take me to lunch. Through the glass door, I saw him tense, his expression darkening. He could tell something was very, very wrong. And he was absolutely right, because what Principal Morrison didn't know would change everything. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Let me back up. Because to understand why that moment in Principal Morrison's office felt like both an insult and a cosmic joke, you need to know about my grandmother. My grandmother Catherine was, in her own words, rich as sin and twice as smart. She built a small fortune in real estate, lived modestly, and watched her family like a hawk. She saw everything, the way my parents Robert and Linda fawned over my sister Madison, the way I was always the afterthought, the disappointment, the one who just didn't have Madison's spark. Before she died when I was 19, Grandma Catherine called me to her lawyer's office. Just me. She'd set up a trust fund. $2.3 million. But there were conditions. I couldn't touch it until I turned 25. I was 23 now, so close, but still so far. And the big one? My family could never know about it. Ever. If I told them, the whole thing would go to charity. Grandma Catherine had seen how my parents treated me, how they poured everything into Madison while I got the scraps. She wanted me to build my own life without them circling like vultures. Let them show you who they really are, she'd said. Then decide if they deserve to be in your life. So I kept quiet. And my family? They ran with their assumptions. Madison was the golden child. Private schools, designer clothes, a car for her 16th birthday. Me? Public school was perfectly adequate. My car was a 15-year-old sedan my dad found on Craigslist, and I was lucky to have it. When Madison wanted to go to a fancy private college, they emptied their savings. When I got into state school on scholarships, they told me how practical I was being. They didn't say I was less than Madison. They didn't have to. Every choice, every comment, every family dinner made it clear. Madison was going places. Emma was doing her best. I worked through college. I saved every penny. I wore secondhand clothes and learned to smile when Madison showed off her latest designer bag, bought with mom and dad's credit card. I played my role, the sensible one, the low-maintenance one, the one who didn't need much, and I never told them about Grandma Catherine's gift. Here's the thing about being the disappointing child. You start to believe it. When I was 14, I came home with straight A's and a letter saying I'd qualified for the gifted program. My mom glanced at it and said, "That's nice, sweetie," then spent the next hour gushing about Madison making the cheer squad. My dad actually told me not to make a big deal about my grades because it might make Madison feel bad, so I stopped making a big deal. I stopped raising my hand in class. I started saying, "I don't know," when I absolutely did know. I learned to make myself smaller because that's what kept the peace. Meanwhile, Madison was thriving. When she was 16, my parents announced she'd be attending Ashford Academy for her junior and senior years. Ashford, the Ashford Academy, the most prestigious private school in the state, where senators' kids and tech moguls' children roamed the halls. It cost more per year than most people's cars. My parents were so proud. They threw her a party. They bought her a whole new wardrobe. And me? I was 15, standing in the kitchen, and my mom said, "You understand why this is just for Madison, right? She has so much potential, and you're doing fine where you are." Where I was. The public school with the leaking ceiling and the outdated textbooks. The school that was perfectly adequate for someone like me. I said I understood. I always said I understood. But here's what they didn't see. I worked. God, did I work. I studied in the public library until it closed. I took every AP class available. I applied for every scholarship I could find, and when I graduated as valedictorian with a full ride to state school, my parents came to the ceremony and spent the whole time talking about Madison's acceptance to a fancy private college. 4 years later, I applied to graduate programs. I wanted to push myself, to see what I was actually capable of when I wasn't playing small. And I got in. To Ashford Academy's master's program in education. Full scholarship. When I told my family, my dad actually laughed. He thought I was joking. Madison said, "You? At Ashford?" Like I'd announced I was joining the circus. But I went anyway. At 23, I walked onto that campus as a graduate student, wearing my thrift store clothes and carrying my secondhand bag, and I belonged there. My grades proved it. My thesis advisor praised my work. I belonged there. But apparently, nobody wanted me to know that. My first semester at Ashford was like being an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. The graduate program was small, maybe 30 students, and I stood out immediately, not because of my work, which was solid, but because of everything else. My classmates wore Patagonia and carried leather bags that cost more than my rent. They talked casually about their summer homes and their parents' connections, and there was me in my thrift store blazer and Target flats, working 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore to cover my living expenses. I kept my head down, did my work, and tried not to draw attention. That lasted about 3 weeks. Principal Morrison ran Ashford Academy like it was her personal kingdom. She'd been there for 15 years, climbing from vice principal to principal. And she had a very specific vision for her school. That vision involved wealthy donors, prestigious alumni, and students who looked good in the promotional materials. Students like me? We complicated the narrative. It started small. She'd pass me in the hallway and her eyes would flick over my outfit with this tiny, dismissive expression. Once, at a department meeting, she made a joke about charity cases and looked directly at me. Everyone laughed. I smiled like I was in on it. Another time, she loudly asked another administrator about the scholarship students and whether they were maintaining the standards we expect. I was standing right there. She knew I could hear her. The comments got more pointed. At a faculty mixer I somehow got invited to, she introduced me to a donor as one of our tuition assistant students with this syrupy voice that made it sound like I was a charity project. She asked me, in front of a group of professors, if I'd considered the financial burden of continuing my education. She suggested more than once that some students aren't cut out for the rigors of graduate work, while staring meaningfully at my worn backpack. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself she was like this with everyone. I told myself that if I just worked harder, proved myself more, she'd back off. That's what you do when you've spent your whole life making yourself smaller, right? You assume the problem is you. You assume you're not enough. You keep your head down and hope the target moves off your back. I met Daniel in October in the library at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday. I was buried in research for a paper on educational equity, ironically enough, and he was shelving books as part of his teaching assistantship. He knocked over my coffee while reaching for a reference book, apologized profusely, bought me a new one, and then spent 20 minutes debating my thesis with me. He disagreed with half my points. I loved it. Daniel came from money, the kind of old money where people don't talk about it because everyone already knows. His family had a wing named after them in the science building, but you'd never know it from talking to him. He wore regular jeans, drove a practical car, and actually cared about ideas more than appearances. He was getting his PhD in education policy because he genuinely wanted to fix the system, not because it looked good on a resume. We started getting coffee, then dinner. Then he was walking me to my car after late study sessions and texting me articles he thought I'd find interesting. 3 weeks in, I realized I was completely gone for him. He asked me out officially in November, right before Thanksgiving break, and I said yes so fast, I almost interrupted him. Dating Daniel was easy, in a way I'd never experienced. He didn't care that I worked at the bookstore or that my apartment was tiny. He thought it was impressive that I'd gotten into Ashford on merit. He actually listened, when I talked about my research, but Daniel also noticed things I'd trained myself not to see, like when Principal Morrison passed us in the hallway and greeted him warmly while her eyes skated right past me like I was invisible, or when the department secretary handed everyone their mail except mine, which she left on the counter for me to retrieve myself, or when the faculty advisor meeting times were posted and somehow my name was consistently left off the email list. "Does she always do that?" he asked after Morrison made another comment about scholarship students needing extra support. I shrugged. "She's just like that." "Emma, she's not like that with anyone else. I've been here 2 years. I've never heard her talk to another student that way." I told him he was reading too much into it, but he kept noticing, and slowly, painfully, he was helping me see what I'd been ignoring all along. The harassment stopped being subtle right after winter break. In January, there was a departmental mixer, one of those networking events where graduate students were supposed to schmooze with faculty and potential employers. Everyone in the program got an invitation. Everyone except me. I found out when my classmate Ashley mentioned it casually, assuming I'd received the same email. When I checked with the department, the secretary said, "Oh, that must have been an oversight." But she didn't offer to add me to the list. The mixer happened without me. Daniel was furious, but I told him to let it go. Then, in February, Principal Morrison sat in on one of my presentations for a graduate seminar. She'd never done that before. Halfway through my talk on literacy intervention strategies, she interrupted. "Where did you say you did your undergraduate work?" she asked. Everyone turned to look. "State University," I said. "On scholarship." She nodded slowly. Like that explained something. "And you feel qualified to speak on advanced pedagogical theory with that background?" My professor jumped in, praised my work, but the damage was done. My classmates looked uncomfortable. I felt like I was back in my parents' kitchen, being reminded of my place. A week later, Morrison called me into her office for what she called a check-in. She asked how I was managing the workload and whether I'd thought about other career paths that might be more realistic. She said graduate school wasn't for everyone and that there's no shame in recognizing your limitations. She suggested I might want to reconsider my academic path before I invested more time in something that might not pan out. I sat there, nodded, and said I'd think about it, because that's what I did. I kept the peace. I swallowed the insults. I made myself smaller and smaller, hoping that if I just disappeared enough, she'd leave me alone. Daniel asked me why I didn't report her. I told him it wouldn't matter. People like Principal Morrison didn't get in trouble. People like me just learned to endure. In March, my parents and Madison came to visit. They were in town for Madison's work conference, some marketing thing at a downtown hotel, and decided to swing by campus. I should have said I was busy. I should have made up literally any excuse, but I didn't, because somewhere deep down, I still hoped they'd be proud of me. That hope died in about 45 minutes. My mom spent the entire campus tour apologizing. We ran into one of my professors, and before I could introduce myself, she jumped in with, "Emma's here on scholarship. She's worked so hard. We're just so grateful for the financial assistance." The professor looked confused. I wanted to dissolve into the sidewalk. We passed the library where Daniel was studying, and my dad made a comment about how impressive it was that I'd gotten into a school like this despite my limitations. Madison, 25, and working in marketing for a startup, kept making pointed observations. "Wow, Emma, you're really here. At Ashford. Who would have thought?" She said it like I'd won the lottery. Not like I'd earned a spot through my own work. When we passed the scholarship office, she stage whispered, "Is that where you have to go? For the free money?" We ran into a group of parents touring campus with their prospective student, and my mother somehow inserted herself into their conversation. She actually said, "Our daughter attends here. Well, one of them. Madison went to Northeastern, but Emma's here on financial aid." Like it was something that needed to be disclosed, apologized for. Madison pulled me aside at one point and said, "You know, there's no shame in finally finding your level. Not everyone can be exceptional. Some people just need more help." She smiled when she said it, like she was being supportive. They left after lunch, and I stood in the parking lot watching their car disappear, feeling exactly like I had my entire life. Small, insufficient, wrong. Daniel found me there 20 minutes later, and when he asked what was wrong, I couldn't even explain it. How do you tell someone that your own family sees you as a charity case, that they're embarrassed by your existence, that every achievement you earn gets reframed as luck or pity? You don't. You just smile and say, everything's fine. 2 weeks after my family's visit, Principal Morrison's secretary called. The principal wanted to see me, not an email, not a casual hallway conversation, a formal summons to her office. I went during my lunch break, my stomach in knots. Morrison was sitting behind her massive desk when I arrived, and she gestured to the chair across from her like she was granting me an audience. "Emma," she said, folding her hands, "I wanted to have a frank conversation about your future here at Ashford." She let that hang in the air. "You're aware that the board is planning to increase tuition next year. Substantially, even for graduate programs." I nodded. I'd seen the email. "And you're also aware that scholarship funding is becoming increasingly competitive. We can't guarantee the same level of support for all our students, particularly those who are already stretching our resources." I felt my chest tighten. She continued, her voice dripping with false concern. "I've been reviewing your file, and while your academic performance is adequate, I worry about whether this is truly the right fit for you. Financially speaking." She paused. "The reality is that Ashford has standards to maintain. Our donors, our alumni network, they expect a certain caliber of student. Students who can fully participate in the Ashford experience without constantly worrying about money. Students who can contribute to our community in meaningful ways." She wasn't even hiding it anymore. "I think you should seriously consider whether continuing here is in your best interest. There are excellent public programs that might be more suited to your situation, places where you wouldn't feel so out of place. You could withdraw now before next semester and avoid the embarrassment of struggling to make ends meet when the tuition increase hits." She smiled, actually smiled. "I'm only thinking of you, Emma. It would be painful to watch you fail because you simply couldn't afford to succeed." I sat there frozen. My throat was tight. My hands were shaking in my lap. She was telling me to leave. She was telling me I didn't belong. And she was doing it with such practiced concern that if I tried to report it, I'd sound paranoid. I managed to say something about needing time to think. She nodded, looking satisfied, and dismissed me. I walked out of that office feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. I didn't know Daniel had been waiting outside Morrison's office until I stumbled into the hallway and nearly walked right into him. He'd been bringing me lunch, saw me go in, and decided to wait. Through the glass door, he'd watched the entire interaction. He couldn't hear what was said, but he'd seen Morrison's condescending smile, my shaking hands, the way I'd shrunk in that chair. He took one look at my face and steered me out of the building without a word. That night, at his apartment, he made me tell him everything. Every comment Morrison had made, every accidental exclusion, every pointed remark about scholarship students. I downplayed it. I made excuses. I said maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe she had a point about the financial strain. Maybe I should consider transferring somewhere more affordable. Daniel listened to all of it, his expression getting darker and darker. Then he said, "Emma, stop. Just stop." He pulled out his laptop and started searching. He found Ashford's non-discrimination policy. He pulled up emails showing other graduate students being invited to events I'd been excluded from. He made me recount every interaction with Morrison chronologically, and as I did, the pattern became impossible to ignore. "This is discrimination," he said flatly. "She's targeting you because you're a scholarship student. She's trying to force you out because you don't fit her aesthetic for what an Ashford student should look like." I started to protest and he cut me off. "If you were a wealthy legacy student with the exact same qualifications and work ethic, Would she be calling you into her office and suggesting you leave? Would she be questioning your abilities in front of faculty? I opened my mouth, closed it. We both knew the answer. Something is very, very wrong here, Daniel said. And you've been conditioned your entire life to accept being treated like this. Your family did it to you, and now Morrison is doing it, and you keep making yourself smaller because you think that's what you're supposed to do. His voice softened. But you're not supposed to do that, Emma. You belong here. You earned this. And what she's doing to you is illegal. That was the moment. That was when something inside me shifted. I'd spent 23 years swallowing insults and accepting scraps, and I was done. I started documenting everything the next day. Daniel helped me set up a folder on my laptop, organized by date and type of incident. Every email from Morrison, screenshotted and saved. Every interaction, written down with times, dates, and witnesses present. I checked our state's recording laws and learned I could legally record conversations as long as one party consented. And guess what? I was a party. I started carrying my phone with the voice recorder ready. But the real breakthrough came when I reached out to other scholarship students. I'd noticed them over the months, the ones who dressed like me, who worked campus jobs, who got the same dismissive treatment from Morrison. I started with Tyler, a second-year student who worked in the admissions office. We got coffee, and I carefully asked if he'd ever had any issues with the administration. His face went dark. Morrison tried to push me out last year, he said. Kept telling me I wasn't Ashford material, suggested I'd be happier somewhere less competitive. I documented everything and went to my advisor, and she backed off, but she still watches me like I'm going to steal the silverware. There were others. Jasmine, who'd been told her scholarship was being reviewed after she questioned the policy. Marcus, who'd been excluded from a prestigious mentorship program despite having the highest GPA in his cohort. All scholarship students, all treated like temporary guests who'd overstayed their welcome. We started comparing notes, and the pattern was undeniable. Morrison had a type. She targeted students from working-class backgrounds, first-generation college students, anyone who didn't fit her vision of Ashford's elite image. She'd pushed out at least 3 students in the past 2 years, both of them quietly withdrawing after sustained pressure. I collected statements. I gathered emails. I built a timeline that showed Morrison's systematic harassment of scholarship students over the past 5 years. And I contacted a lawyer, one who specialized in education discrimination. The consultation was free, and after I laid out everything I had, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. "This is a strong case," she said. "Very strong. The question is, what do you want to do with it?" I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted Principal Morrison to understand that I wasn't going anywhere. In April, applications opened for the Williamson Fellowship, a prestigious award that came with a $15,000 stipend and basically guaranteed job placement after graduation. I spent 2 weeks on that application. My advisor reviewed it 3 times and called it the strongest submission she'd seen in years. I hand-delivered it to Morrison's office on the deadline day, March 30th, at 2 p.m. I watched her secretary stamp it received. I took a photo of the timestamp. 2 weeks later, Morrison announced the fellowship finalists at a department meeting. My name wasn't on the list. I approached her after, my heart pounding, and asked if there had been a mistake. She looked at me with this practiced confusion. "Emma, dear, you didn't apply. I would have remembered." I told her I had applied, that I had submitted it on time. She shook her head sadly. "The deadline was March 30th. If you'd submitted something, it would be in the file. You must have missed it. These things happen when students are juggling too many responsibilities." She said it in front of half the department, implying I was too busy with my bookstore job to meet deadlines. I wanted to scream. Instead, I went straight to Daniel. He marched me back to the department office, pulled up the submission log on the secretary's computer while she was at lunch, and there it was, my application, submitted March 30th at 2:03 p.m., received and logged. He screenshotted everything, and we went to my faculty advisor with the evidence. My advisor's face went pale. She personally walked the documentation to Morrison's office, and I waited outside. I could hear raised voices. When my advisor emerged, she told me my application would be reviewed and the finalist list would be reconsidered. Morrison came out right after. She looked at me with pure venom. No more fake concern. No more condescending smiles. "You know," she said quietly, so only I could hear, "students who make trouble rarely succeed here. I'd hate to see your transcript suffer because you couldn't let things go." That was a threat, an actual, explicit threat, and for the first time in my life, instead of shrinking back, I smiled. "I'm keeping very detailed records, Principal Morrison, of everything." Her face flushed red, and she walked away without another word. Her mask was slipping, and I was just getting started. My mother called me that weekend. Apparently, Madison had heard through some Ashford alumni connection that I was causing problems with the administration. Word travels fast in elite circles, especially when someone like me steps out of line. "Emma, what are you doing?" Mom asked, her voice tight with that particular strain of embarrassment I knew so well. "We've been hearing things, that you're making complaints about the principal, that you're accusing her of discrimination." I tried to explain what Morrison had been doing, but she cut me off. "Honey, you're on scholarship. You need to be grateful for the opportunity you've been given. Making waves isn't going to help your situation." My dad got on the line. "Your mother's right. Maybe it's time to think practically. You've got a bachelor's degree. That's more than most people. Why not get a real job instead of pretending to be something you're not?" Pretending to be something I'm not. Like belonging at Ashford was a costume I was wearing. Madison called me separately, her voice dripping with condescension. "Emma, I say this because I love you. You're being dramatic. Principals don't just target students for no reason. Maybe you're misinterpreting things because you're stressed about money. It happens." I told her about the lost fellowship application, the documented pattern of harassment. She sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Or maybe you actually did miss the deadline and don't want to admit it. You always do this, make everything about you being victimized. Sometimes people just aren't cut out for certain environments, and that's okay." My own sister was gaslighting me. My parents were embarrassed that their scholarship student daughter was making noise. They wanted me to quit, to go get some entry-level job, to stop reaching above what they decided was my station. I sat in my apartment after those calls, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt. Even Daniel's support couldn't quite fill the void of knowing my own family would rather I fail quietly than succeed loudly. They wanted me small. They needed me small. Because if I wasn't the family disappointment, what did that make them? Principal Morrison's secretary called me on a Monday afternoon in late April. The principal needed to see me immediately. I grabbed my phone, made sure the recording app was running, and walked to her office. Daniel was in class, but I texted him where I was going, just in case. Morrison didn't waste time with pleasantries. There was a withdrawal form on her desk, already filled out with my name. "Emma, we need to have a final conversation about your future here, or rather, your lack of one." She slid the form toward me. "I've been more than patient with you. I've tried to guide you toward a more appropriate path. But you've been resistant, even hostile to my attempts to help you." I stayed silent, my phone recording every word in my bag. "Let me be clear," she continued, her voice losing all pretense of warmth. "You're too poor for this school. These programs are meant for students who can contribute to Ashford's legacy, not drain its resources. Students whose families have connections, who can give back to the institution, who elevate our reputation. You're a scholarship student working in a bookstore. You're not Ashford material, and frankly, your presence here damages our brand." There it was, everything she'd been implying for months, said out loud. "Your scholarship is being terminated effective next semester due to budget constraints," she said, making air quotes. "Without it, you can't afford to be here. This withdrawal form allows you to leave with dignity. You can say it was your choice, that you found other opportunities. Sign it now, and I'll even write you a neutral recommendation letter." She leaned back, confident. Or you can refuse, struggle through next semester without funding, fail out, and leave with nothing. Your choice. My hands were shaking, but not from fear this time. From rage, from the absolute clarity of knowing I was right about her. I need 24 hours to consider, I said, my voice steady. She looked annoyed. Emma, there's nothing to consider. You can't afford... 24 hours, I repeated. You've given me a lot to think about. I want to make sure I'm making the right decision. She smiled, thinking she'd won. Of course, but the form will be waiting. This time tomorrow, I expect your signature. I walked out of Morrison's office and made 4 phone calls. The first was to Mr. Patterson, the lawyer who managed my grandmother's trust. Grandma Catherine had insisted I keep his number, said I might need him someday. Today was that day. Mr. Patterson, it's Emma. I need to know about the educational expenses clause. There was a pause. Your grandmother included a provision for extraordinary educational circumstances. You can access up to $100,000 before age 25 if it's directly related to your education. Has something happened? I told him everything. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Your grandmother would be proud of you. She'd want you to fight. Whatever you need, I'm here. The second call was to my discrimination lawyer. I sent her the recording from Morrison's office, and I could practically hear her grinning through the phone. This is gold, Emma. She just handed us everything we need. When someone tells you you're too poor for an educational institution that receives federal funding, that's textbook discrimination. Third call, the Ashford Board of Directors. I requested an emergency meeting and sent them a formal complaint with my entire documentation file attached, every email, every witness statement, every recorded conversation. I cited specific violations of their own non-discrimination policy and federal education law. I was calm, professional, and absolutely done playing nice. Fourth call, the State Education Board. I filed an official complaint against Principal Morrison and Ashford Academy for systematic discrimination against scholarship students. I provided names of other students she'd pushed out, documented patterns of harassment, and the recording from today's meeting. Then I called Daniel. I need you to be my witness tomorrow. Wear something nice. We're going back to Morrison's office, and this time I'm not leaving quietly. That night, I barely slept. I reviewed my documentation, organized my evidence, and rehearsed exactly what I was going to say. My grandmother had given me a gift, not just the trust fund, but the freedom to fight back without fear. Tomorrow, Principal Morrison was going to learn that being poor and being powerless weren't the same thing, and I was about to make that lesson very, very expensive for her. I walked into Principal Morrison's office at exactly 2 p.m. the next day. Daniel was with me, dressed in a button-down and slacks, looking every inch the wealthy legacy student he actually was. Morrison's face tightened when she saw him, but she recovered quickly. Emma, I see you've brought a friend. This is really a private matter. Daniel's here as a witness, I said calmly, sitting down. I want everything that happens in this room to be documented. I pulled out a folder, the withdrawal form she'd given me on top, unsigned. Before we discuss this form, I want to review some concerns I have about my treatment at this institution. I laid out the documentation piece by piece. The emails, the witness statements from Tyler, Jasmine, and Marcus, the timeline of harassment. Morrison's face went from annoyed to alarmed as I methodically walked through every incident, every exclusion, every degrading comment. And finally, I said, pulling out my phone, I have yesterday's conversation recorded, the one where you told me, and I quote, "You're too poor for this school." The color drained from her face. You recorded me. That's illegal. Not in this state, Daniel said quietly. Single-party consent. I continued. I've already filed complaints with the Board of Directors, the State Education Board, and I've consulted with a lawyer who specializes in education discrimination. This documentation has been submitted to all relevant parties. Morrison's hands were shaking now. You can't prove discrimination. You're just a disgruntled student who... Who what? Who's too poor? I leaned forward. Here's the thing, Principal Morrison. You made a lot of assumptions about me, about what I could and couldn't afford, about what I deserved. I pulled out one more document, a letter from Mr. Patterson, on official law firm letterhead, confirming the existence and value of my trust fund. My grandmother left me 2.3 million. I can't access most of it until I'm 25, but I could access enough right now to pay for this degree 10 times over. I could write a check to endow a full scholarship in her name tomorrow, if I wanted to. Morrison's face went absolutely white. In fact, I continued, I have more money than most of your donors. I could contribute more to Ashford's legacy than half the families whose children you fawn over. But I chose not to tell anyone because my grandmother wanted me to see who people really were when they thought I had nothing. I stood up. Turns out you showed me exactly who you are. Morrison tried to speak, but I wasn't finished. I've been in contact with 5 other scholarship students who experienced similar treatment from you. Tyler, Jasmine, Marcus, and 2 others who already left Ashford because of your harassment. They've all provided written statements detailing your pattern of discrimination. Tyler documented how you told him he wasn't Ashford material. Jasmine has emails where you questioned her cultural fit with the institution. Marcus recorded you excluding him from the mentorship program despite having the highest GPA in his cohort. I pulled out the stack of statements and placed them on her desk. The board received all of this yesterday, so did the state education board. My lawyer believes we have an exceptionally strong case for systematic discrimination based on socioeconomic status, which violates both Ashford's own policies and federal education law. The recording of you explicitly telling me I'm too poor for this school, that's what lawyers call a slam dunk. Morrison's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady and cold. I'm not withdrawing. I'm not going anywhere. I earned my place here through my work, my grades, my merit. I will finish my degree at Ashford Academy, and you will not interfere with my education in any way. I leaned forward. And things are going to change. The board is launching a formal investigation into your conduct. If I hear about you targeting another scholarship student, if I hear about another accidental exclusion, or another student being told they're not good enough for Ashford because of their bank account, I will make sure every newspaper, every education blog, every social media platform knows exactly how this prestigious institution treats students who don't come from money. Daniel pulled out his phone. I've already drafted the press release. It's comprehensive. Morrison finally found her voice. You're making a terrible mistake. I have connections. I have influence in this community. And I have documentation. I cut her off. I have evidence. I have witnesses. And I have nothing left to lose because I stopped being afraid of you the moment I realized you're just a bully in expensive shoes. I picked up the withdrawal form and tore it in half. I'll see you at graduation, Principal Morrison. The board moved faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, Principal Morrison was placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The announcement went out to the entire Ashford community, carefully worded, but clear enough that everyone knew something serious had happened. And once that door opened, the flood began. Students I'd never even met started coming forward. A former student who'd left 2 years ago reached out with her own documentation of Morrison's harassment. A current undergraduate described being told she should reconsider her place at Ashford after her family fell on hard times. Another graduate student shared emails where Morrison had questioned whether scholarship students should be allowed in advanced courses. By the end of the first week, there were 11 formal complaints. 11. Morrison had been systematically pushing out students she deemed beneath Ashford's image for years, and everyone had stayed quiet because they thought they were alone. The investigation became the talk of campus. My name was kept confidential officially, but word spread anyway. People looked at me differently now, a mix of respect and curiosity. Some students thanked me, others avoided me like I was contagious. Then my family found out. Not from me, from Madison's former roommate, who'd heard about it through the Ashford Alumni Network and mentioned it at some marketing event. Madison called me at 11 p.m., her voice shaking with rage. "You have a trust fund? $2 million? And you never told us?" My mother called an hour later. "Emma, how could you keep this from us? We're your family. We've been struggling, and you've been sitting on all that money. Do you know how selfish that is?" My father's email came the next morning. Subject line, disappointed. The message detailed how Madison had student loans, how they'd emptied their retirement to pay for her education, how I could have helped and chose not to, how I'd made them look bad by pretending to be poor. "You lied to us," my mother said when I finally answered her fifth call. "You made us think you needed help, that you were struggling, and the whole time you had millions?" "Grandma Catherine left it to me," I said quietly. "With conditions. One of them was that you couldn't know." "That's ridiculous. We're your parents. You should have told us anyway. Madison has $60,000 in loans, Emma. You could pay that off without even noticing." And there it was. They weren't upset I'd kept a secret. They were upset I hadn't shared the money. I met my family for coffee 3 days later, all 3 of them, united in their outrage. I brought Daniel, who sat beside me like a silent anchor. Madison started immediately. "So you're just going to hoard Grandma's money while I'm drowning in debt? That's really who you are?" "Grandma Catherine left that money to me," I said calmly, "with explicit instructions that I couldn't tell you about it. If I had, the entire trust would have gone to charity. She made that choice deliberately." My mother's voice went sharp. "Your grandmother was bitter and vindictive. She always favored you for some reason." "She favored me because she saw how you treated me," I said. "She watched you pour everything into Madison while giving me scraps. She watched you make me small and tell me I wasn't good enough. She wanted me to have something that was mine alone, something you couldn't take or diminish." My father tried the guilt angle. "Family helps family, Emma. We sacrificed for you." "You sacrificed for Madison," I interrupted. "You sent her to private school while I went to public. You paid for her college while I worked for scholarships. You bought her a car, clothes, opportunities. I got hand-me-downs and lectures about being practical. Don't rewrite history now that you know I have money." Madison slammed her hand on the table. "I can't believe you're being this selfish. I'm your sister. And you've spent our entire lives treating me like I was less than you. You called me dramatic for reporting discrimination. You told me I was finding my level when I got into Ashford. You've never, not once, been proud of me or supported me." I stood up. "I'm not your backup bank. I'm not your safety net. I'm not the family disappointment you can fall back on when things get hard. Grandma Catherine's money is mine. Her conditions were clear, and I'm honoring her wishes." My mother started crying. My father called me ungrateful. Madison said I was dead to her. I walked out with Daniel's hand in mine, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. Daniel squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you." I was proud of me too. The board's investigation took 6 weeks. They interviewed students, reviewed documentation, examined Morrison's personnel file, and discovered a pattern of behavior that went back nearly a decade. In June, the official announcement came. Principal Morrison was no longer employed by Ashford Academy. They called it a mutual separation. Everyone knew what it really was. The board also announced sweeping changes to how scholarship programs would be managed. A new oversight committee, mandatory bias training for all administrators, and a confidential reporting system for students who felt discriminated against. Tyler, Jasmine, Marcus, and I were invited to help develop the new policies. They actually listened to us, and I made one more change of my own. I contacted Mr. Patterson and established the Catherine Mitchell Scholarship Fund, endowed with $500,000 from my trust. It would provide full tuition and living expenses for 2 students per year from working-class backgrounds, first-generation college students, anyone who'd been told they didn't belong in spaces like Ashford. The scholarship included a mentorship component and explicit protection against discrimination. My grandmother would have loved it. My family stopped calling after that coffee meeting. No more guilt trips, no more demands, no more attempts to make me feel small. Madison blocked me on social media. My parents sent one final email saying I'd chosen money over family, which was ironic coming from people who'd only cared about me once they knew I had money. I didn't respond. Daniel asked me once if I missed them. I thought about it, really thought about it. Did I miss the criticism, the constant comparisons, the feeling of never being enough? Did I miss being their scapegoat, their backup plan, their designated disappointment? No, I didn't miss them at all. What I missed was the fantasy of having a family who actually loved me. But that family had never existed, and I was finally okay with that. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the apartment Daniel and I just moved into together, looking at my master's degree hanging on the wall. I graduated with honors. My thesis on socioeconomic discrimination in educational institutions won a departmental award, which felt beautifully ironic. The first two recipients of the Catherine Mitchell Scholarship started at Ashford this fall, and watching them walk around campus with confidence, knowing they're protected, makes everything worth it. Daniel proposed last month with a ring his grandmother left him and a speech about how I taught him what real strength looks like. I said yes before he finished asking. Ashford is different now. Not perfect, but better. The new principal actually knows scholarship students by name. The oversight committee I helped create is making real changes. Students who would have been quietly pushed out are staying, thriving, proving they belong. My family reaches out occasionally, usually when Madison needs money for something or my parents want help with a bill. I don't respond. They showed me exactly who they were, and I finally believed them. My mother sent a Christmas card last year with a note about healing our relationship. I threw it away. Some relationships aren't meant to be healed. Some people only want you in their lives when you're useful. And I'm done being useful to people who never valued me. I have Daniel, who loves me for exactly who I am. I have friends who chose me, not because of what I could give them, but because they actually like me. I have my grandmother's legacy, helping students who need it. I have peace, real peace, not the fake peace that comes from making yourself small enough that no one bothers to hurt you. But sometimes I wonder, should I have told my family about the trust fund sooner, before they showed their true colors so completely? Should I have handled Principal Morrison differently, been less confrontational, tried to work within the system instead of burning it down? Did I go too far or not far enough?